Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Saturday night, August 29th edition of StudentLoanJustice.org live stream. My name is Alan Collins. I am founder of StudentLoanJustice.org. We've been around for 15 years now. We've been featured on 60 Minutes, in the New York Times, Los Angeles Times, NPR, PBS, Newsmax, CNBC, Rolling Stone, Vice News, Fast Company, pretty much you name it, we've been featured in it. We've been looking very closely and fighting absolutely and only for student loan borrowers for many years. I myself am a student loan borrower. All of our state chapter leaders, and we have state chapters for all 50 states, all have student loans themselves. So you can be very confident that we are working only for the solution to this problem. For the first 15 years, we were fighting very moderately, simply for the return of bankruptcy protections to student loans. So unlike all other loans in this country, student loans have been uniquely, specifically stripped of the same bankruptcy protections that every other borrower for every other type of loan enjoys. So 15 years, folks. We did get a lot done, many pieces of legislation going back to Hillary Clinton's Student Borrower Bill of Rights Act in 2007 were sponsored, introduced into the House and Senate on our behalf. But Congress failed us, folks, and here we are now, and I am here to tell you very confidently, this is now a failed lending system. It's failed. It's over the cliff. It's done. It's toast. Even before the coronavirus crisis, the default rate among everybody walking around right now with student loans was going to be somewhere around 60, if not 70%. Well, now that the coronavirus is happening, nobody's paying on their loans. We've lost 50 million jobs. I think only 9 million of those jobs have come back up to this point. Hey, Debbie Westmoreland Baker. Well, thank you, Debbie. I appreciate your comments. And by the way, if you're new to the group, welcome. If you have any questions or comments, throw them out as we go along. I'm very happy to respond to your questions and comments rather than being a talking head up here. So folks, I'm here to tell you it's a failed lending system. Just take that as the gold standard for now, and I can prove that later if you have any questions. We are now, we continue to push for bankruptcy, it's true, but these loans have got to be canceled. Done away with, expunged, exterminated, liquidated, erased, deleted, pick your word, whatever works for you. These loans have got to go. Now, the tricky thing, and that's what I'm going to talk about tonight, is the nitty-gritty about loan cancellation. It's kind of a difficult subject. It's complicated. It's complex. Shouldn't be, but it is, right? If you loan somebody $100 and they get cancer and they lose their job and stuff, well, all right, you're done. We're good. You don't owe me anything. That's how it goes. Well, with student loans, particularly federally guaranteed or federally made student loans, it gets a little bit thornier. But I'm here to tell you, not that much thornier. So we're seeing a lot about loan cancellation right now. In fact, we've got many loan cancellation programs, federal programs, already in place for federal student loans. We have public service loan forgiveness. We have the income-based repayment program. We have pay as you earn, PAYE. We have repay. We have IDR. We have ICR. We've got a whole bunch of statewide forgiveness programs, etc. Well, I'm here to tell you that certainly all the federal loan cancellation programs, like the public service loan forgiveness, like IBR, they are a cruel joke. And we are the punchline. Last year, something like 144,000 people were supposed to be getting their federal loans canceled because of public service. They worked for 10 years at a nonprofit, maybe a hospital, maybe a school, maybe a church, who knows. But you know how many people actually got their loans canceled out of that, I think 144,000 people? Like, the last I checked, it was like 226 people. So that's like 0.8%. Everybody else was told by the Department of Education or its contractors, oh, no, you don't qualify for the forgiveness because oh, you had the wrong type of loan. You were in the wrong type of program, or you didn't fill out your paperwork correctly, and this and that, any number of reasons. The Department of Education found to not cancel loans. And oh, by the way, the Department of Education also says, oh, we can only cancel as many loans as Congress appropriates us money for. So like last year, I think they got an appropriation of $550 million. And that sounds like a lot, but guys, I'm telling you, that's not enough to cancel very many loans at all. Like probably not many more than 226. When people on average are borrowing $40,000 plus right now, and the average borrower has a balance of like $36,000, well, it goes pretty quick when you only have $550 million to play with. So, loan cancellation as it exists now, and most importantly, as it is being proposed right now by Bernie Sanders, well, in the presidential race by Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, and others, as is being proposed right now by candidate Biden, as it is being proposed by legislators in Congress like Ayanna Pressley and others, is mortally, terminally flawed. It's just flawed because all of the congressional efforts to cancel student loans, just like right now how the Department of Education requires $1 to be paid to it for every dollar in loans it cancels, that just doesn't work. It just doesn't work. There's $1.5 trillion outstanding federal student loan debt. And if you think that Congress is going to pass a law that raises taxes and appropriates $1.5 trillion so that the federal government can cancel $1.5 trillion in federal student loans, you're dreaming. That's fantasy land. That $550 million that the Department of Education got last year to cancel loans through public service, that took a lot of arm twisting, I am sure, on the Hill. So $550 million, that's like $500 million. So try raising $1,500 billion from Congress. Ain't gonna happen. It's nonsense. It's a pipe dream. Right, Debbie. Debbie says those balances are ridiculous. Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, good point, Debbie. Of that $1.5 trillion in federal student debt, I should probably add, probably most of it, probably like 2/3 of it, and nobody knows what the true fraction is, but my best guess, and I'm usually a very good guesser on this, my best guess is that something like 2/3, maybe even less, of that 1.5 trillion is actual unpaid principal. The government has been making money hand over fist on this program for certainly the past decade when the older style FFELP program was replaced and the government became the lender. So the government makes interest, etc. In fact, we know that I think for the year 2011 or 2012, which was among the first few years of the new program where the government makes all the interest and makes the loans, the government was profiting like $50 billion a year on the system. And, that was back when we only owed $1 trillion. So the government has made a very handsome profit on this lending system over the past 10 years. And just think about your own situation. I would bet that whatever they say you owe right now, I bet the majority of that is not principal. It's like you borrowed $50,000. They now say you owe $175,000 or something. That seems to be more the rule than the exception. So that's a good point, Debbie. But getting back to loan cancellation, guys, all the loan cancellation programs that we have now in place today, they're ridiculous because of that first thing, why the Department of Education needs to be paid $1 for every dollar in loan cancellation that happens. But second of all, the Department of Education has no desire nor intentions of canceling any loans. They want to make as much money on that portfolio as they can. Now, I'm sure every other federal agency in our government is great. I'm sure the post office does a fantastic job, looks out for the people. I'm sure the Department of Veterans Affairs does a fantastic job, looks out for the soldiers. I'm sure the Department of Agriculture is first and foremost concerned with the farmers. I have no doubt. Well, I don't know, but I'm just assuming that. So the federal government is great. But folks, I'm telling you, the Department of Education is a corrupted, fatally captured agency. They run like a bank. And by the way, the people who run it, by and large, are former bankers from the student loan industry. They don't want to cancel any loans. It's their cash cow. So that's why we're seeing public service loan forgiveness, 0.8% success rate. And by the way, all the people who find out the hard way that their loans aren't getting canceled, they're getting stuck with bills that are far, far, far more than they ever borrowed in the first place. So loan cancellation, as we have it now, is a farce. It's a trick. It's a scam. It's a lie. And we're all being lied to. We are the butt of that joke. Very vicious, cruel, predatory joke. So the good news is, it doesn't have to be that way, folks. We shouldn't have to raise $1.5 trillion in tax to cancel $1.5 trillion in loans. That's just nonsense. Because think about it. The federal government owns these loans. 85% of all student debt is owned directly by the federal government. The federal government made the loans. The federal government now holds the loans. The taxpayers have already paid for these loans. Already paid. They do not need to pay twice. And thankfully, I've reviewed the Higher Education Act of 1965 as amended many times. And not only have I, but others have as well, including Yale scholar Luke Herring. And I am here to tell you that the Higher Education Act of 1965 as amended gives the Secretary of Education, and by extension the President of the United States, all the authority they need to quote-unquote compromise, waive, or release the federal interest in these loans. Okay? Now, with a law that Congress passes, well, yeah, I mean, by the rules of Congress, so-called PAYGO rules, supposedly, I mean, and they by and large do follow this rule, like Obamacare, for example, that was a net cost to the taxpayers. So yeah, they had to raise whatever that cost was. And oh, by the way, government profits from student loans were used to offset those costs for Obamacare, I should add. So if you hate Obamacare, we take no position. But if you don't like Obamacare, and you're a conservative, I suspect, well, that's one more reason to not like Obamacare and to not like the federal student loan system. So, yeah, by the rules of the House, that's true. So Bernie Sanders, he's like, yeah, we're going to raise taxes on the wealthy. And Elizabeth Warren, we're going to raise taxes on the wealthy. And Joe Biden was like, yeah, we're going to re-implement a capital gains tax or something to pay for this loan cancellation. And by the way, I am personally, and we're a nonpartisan group. We stay out of other issues. We only care about student loans. But I will say, and I suspect most people in this group would agree with me, that I have no problem with taxing the wealthiest people in this country far, 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 far more than they are taxed now. You know, at the end of World War II, the wealthiest among us were being taxed at a rate of like 90, I think 2%. And they were actually paying like 70-something%. So they were actually paying 70-something% taxes on their profits, the wealthiest 1% in this country. I have no problem going back to something like that. My problem is, if you're going to raise taxes, that's great. Get that money, do something good with it. Don't use it to pay off student loans, because it doesn't need to happen that way. The taxpayers have already paid for these loans many years ago. And by the way, the taxpayers have probably made most of their money back. There's no good reason to give the Department of Education and the swamp creatures, bankers, etc., who run it, $1.5 trillion to cancel $1.5 trillion in loans. The president could issue an executive order canceling these loans tomorrow, and it would be done. He wouldn't need to get one dime of appropriation from Congress. And by the way, this would technically not add one penny to the national debt. You know, we just got done throwing like, I think $9 trillion now out to this economy in wake of the, because of the coronavirus crisis. $9 trillion got added onto the national debt. And yeah, okay, we got $1,200 stimulus checks. Oh, right. Okay, some small businesses got PPP loans, which, by the way, they don't have to pay back, I might add. Banks, investment companies, Wall Street got who knows how many trillions of dollars. I don't know. It's disgusting. But all that stuff added to the national debt. These federal student loans could be canceled tomorrow without adding one nickel to the national debt. You know, national debt as defined is how much money the Treasury owes. Well, these loans have already been paid for. Whatever was added to the national debt as a result of making these loans, probably not more than like $400 billion, I suspect. Maybe even zero. I don't know. It could be that the federal government has already broken even on these loans. But the president could cancel these loans tomorrow, would add not one penny to the national debt. Okay? That's the point. Now, we are portraying this method of canceling student loans is supposedly controversial, okay? And there are those out there, swamp creatures, who want the lending system to persist, by the way. And there's two main arguments that they make to claim that no, the president cannot cancel these loans by executive order. And by the way, I urge you all to look very closely. Look at the Higher Education Act. Look at section, is it 130? I believe it's 133A, parentheses A. And along those lines. So the older 1965 law is Public Law number 96-88, section 301, parentheses A, 93 statute 668, 677. And that's October 18th, 1979. So that's the nitty-gritty of the law. You can find it if you Google Higher Education Act and all that stuff I just said. And you can see yourself. The Secretary of Education has the authority to enforce, pay, compromise, waive, release any right, title, claim, or demand, however arising with respects to federal student loans that are owned by the federal government. And, this actually could include Perkins loans, I should say. Perkins loans are a very small part of all student loans, but it could include Perkins loans. Hey, we have another comment here from Cindy Free. Let me just get this in here. What about, okay. I'm glad that you asked, because that's good timing there, Cindy. What about FFELP loans? Right now, as a practical matter, FFELP loans are not owned directly by the federal government. They are the note themselves are owned by private companies like Sallie Mae or Navient, or actually Sallie Mae or Nelnet or other private companies. So it would be a little more difficult, actually, for the president to do that. However, I will say, and I can speak from personal experience, if you have FFELP loans, and these are the older style loans that were guaranteed, not made directly by the federal government, and if you're of a certain age, if you're over the age of, I think 40, then you probably have FFELP loans. You, at least technically, can default on those loans and then demand that the guarantor, and you will have a guarantor that will be coming after you with collection companies on these loans if you haven't defaulted already. That's what's coming if you do default. You can default on these loans and you can demand that your loans be transferred directly to the Department of Education. And they have to do this. And they will do that. And then, assuming that the executive order still carries the force of law, which I think it would. We're talking hypotheticals here. But then they would be owned by the federal government, and those loans would and could be canceled. So that's a little bit of a fuzzy answer because who knows? There might be a challenge. Okay, so, Sophie Norwood also, Sophie Nawandi also says the profits from student loans don't support Obamacare. That's a lie. Yeah, I'm sorry, Sophia, but in fact, they do. If you look at the Affordable Care Act and the supplemental legislation that went along with that, the title of the legislation escapes me, you can see for yourself that, profits from the federal direct lending system, which were created, which took over the FFELP program as a part of the language in the Affordable Care Act itself and its supplements. You will see that profits from the federal student loan program, I can't remember the amount, I think it was either like $5 billion a year or $8 billion a year. It wasn't a ton of money in the grand scheme of things, but it was some. Are indeed used to offset the costs of the Affordable Care Act. So, I don't lie. The one thing that we do not do here is lie. On rare occasion, I may put out bad information, and usually if I do that, in fact, always when I do that, I will very quickly correct myself when I am made aware. But you can trust that we are quite careful in our research, and we are quite thorough in vetting facts about this topic. Because we are a very low budget organization, we are a very fragile organization. If we were to say something that could make us liable, we'd be in big trouble. And just me personally, I don't like saying terrible things about the government unless I am like 100% sure that they are true. So rest assured that we are very cautious in the facts that we put out and make sure that the facts are correct. And I know a lot of Obamacare itself is a very controversial issue, and that fact can be used by partisans to skew, to make their own political points. We don't do that, but anyways. I am okay with profits coming from the financial industry, but not from student loans. I'm not okay, personally, with the government making any kind of a profit on anything. Does the military make a profit? No. Does the Department of Agriculture make a profit? No, they do not. The government making profit, particularly from lending money to its own citizens, that just is wrong. It's wrong on its face. And, back in 1965, as a part of the Higher Education Act, which I have been quoting to you tonight, President Lyndon Baines Johnson, at the signing speech for the HEA, he declared that the loans would be free of interest. I urge you to look at his signing speech, and he says that. Well, today, about $100 billion in interest alone is clicking off on the federal student loan portfolio. So what happened, guys? This lending system has grown into something. It has morphed into a big government monstrosity. And whether you are a Democrat or Republican, you have to agree with that. This is something that the Founding Fathers, certainly the Congress of 1965 and the president back then, they had no idea that this was going to be the fate of this very benign and generous lending system that they originally created. Okay, folks, so back to my original point. There are some swamp people that would like to claim that the president cannot cancel loans by executive order. Now, the first point that they make, there's 2 points. The first point that the bad people bring up is something called the Anti-Deficiency Act. This is a very, very old law, by the way. I'm not sure when it came in, but it came in many decades ago. Let's just say that. And by the way, it's never, ever, ever been used to reprimand, revoke, or otherwise check any president's power. But nonetheless, it is a law on the books, and the bad guys do point to it. The Anti-Deficiency Act forbids the president from making any executive order that requires Congress to spend money. Okay, so the president can't, I don't know, issue an executive order saying that Congress shall now give a dry martini to every citizen of Hawaii, right? Because that would cost money. The Congress would have to appropriate money to all the bartenders and the bars in Hawaii so that they could make those drinks for all the good citizens of Hawaii and the bad, all the citizens. That's against the law. President can't do that. President can't do something that obligates Congress to spend money. Well, and so the haters say, yeah, so canceling student loans costs money, so the president can't do that because Congress shouldn't have to spend that kind of money. Well, no. That's nonsense, people. Because Congress already spent that money. Congress already paid for these loans many years ago. No congressional appropriation is needed to cancel these loans. Yeah, it might be money off of the ledger of the balance sheet of the Department of Education, but that does not compel Congress to order the Treasury to start writing checks to anybody. The president can cancel these loans and no money would change hands. Not even 1 penny would change any hands. So people pointing to the Anti-Deficiency Act are completely wrong and laughably so. And that's just ridiculous. I mean, it's nonsense. People could try to sue the Department of Education or the president for doing that, and they would get laughed out of court. So we're good on that note. There's another far more muddy argument that I hear from people like Mark Kantrowitz, who I have respect for. Mark's a very smart guy, knows far more than even I do about the student loan program, particularly the behind-the-scenes sort of backroom nuts and bolts of the lending program. And Mark would like to claim that because of discrimination concerns, the president cannot arbitrarily cancel student loans. And he gives the example of recently when President Trump, believe it or not, by executive order, canceled the federal student loans of 100% disabled military veterans. And what Mark would say, I think verbatim almost, was that the president can't one day issue a decree canceling all the loans of everybody that has red hair, because that's discriminatory. And, he pointed to the Higher Education Act legislation that he claims supports that argument. But, and I have respect for Mark, he knows a lot, and he's rarely wrong. Me and Mark have argued many times over the years, like probably hundreds of times. And he has won most of those arguments, I am very happy to admit. But he's lost a couple. I can count the number that he has lost on like maybe 2 to 3 fingers. And this is one of those fingers. There is nothing in the legislation that precludes the government from, or the secretary, I should say, and by extension the president, arbitrarily waiving, canceling, releasing the government's right in student loans, whether as onesies and twosies or as one big group. And by the way, if discrimination is the concern here, it is not discriminatory at all to cancel all of the federal loans that the federal government holds. In fact, that is about the least discriminatory way that a president could cancel loans. There's no discrimination there, period. So even if there were some legal basis for claiming that the president having arbitrary authority and the secretary, president by extension, having arbitrary authority to waive, cancel, release federal student loan debt, it would have no bearing on the case where the president were to cancel all of the loans for all of the people. That's by definition not discriminatory. So, yeah, in the case of canceling the student loans of 100% disabled vets, that are given that there was no prior rule in place by which that could happen. And by the way, for 100% disabled people, not just veterans, anybody that has a 100% disability determination, either from the VA or from the Social Security Administration, those people are already eligible, like with doing nothing more than filling out a little bit of paperwork, to get their loans canceled. So, yeah, if there was already nothing in place for disabled vets uniquely, or disabled people, I should say, uniquely, to get their loans canceled, then, yeah, maybe somebody would have grounds to sue saying, hey, that's discriminatory. You can't just cancel loans for 100% disabled, but not for everybody else. Maybe there would be a case to be made. But we're talking about canceling all loans, people, all loans. And so you know, it's not just me that is saying that. And again, I urge you to look up Luke Herring, Herrine. Google Herring, Luke Herring, cancel student loans and like Higher Education Act. And you can very quickly find his paper where he goes over much of this in very far more detail than I can here tonight. So if you don't believe me, believe Luke. And so, folks, the end of the story on this is that we're good. We are good. These loans can be canceled by the president tomorrow. And they must be. You know, nobody is paying on their student loans right now. We're in this, certainly on the federal student loans, almost nobody is paying. Except for those sort of overly ambitious people that really want to get their loans done. And that's very few people. But, you know, even before the coronavirus crisis, almost nobody was paying. You know, before the coronavirus crisis, 80% of all borrowers were either not paying, not able to pay, and that's somewhere around 63% of all borrowers, or they were paying and paying and paying, and their balance was going up. So, I don't know what you call that, folks, but what I call that, and I think you should agree, it's a failed lending system. It's done. It's toast. And that was before the coronavirus. So, dudes, we're good. Now, you know, in this current presidential election, we have at least one of the candidates right now, Joe Biden, promising at least partial loan cancellation. And yes, his cancellation plan is garbage. It requires Congress to pass a law raising money, going through the Department of Education, and ultimately it will never wind up canceling almost anybody's loans. It'll be just another farce, just like the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program. And by the way, just like IBR. If you're currently on IBR and you think you're going to get your loans canceled in 5, 10, 15 years, no, you're not. You're just not. The Department of Education is going to do everything it can to kick as many people out of that program so that by the time the time comes to actually start canceling those loans, only a tiny, almost probably vanishingly small percentage of the people will actually get their loans canceled. So Sophia says, I am okay with the profits coming from the financial industry, but not from student loans. I mean, like Wall Street side of financial, they can afford it. Yeah, you know, don't even get me started, Sophia. It's a little beyond the scope of this group, but the amount of wealth that has accrued to the wealthiest 1% or maybe even 0.5% of people in this country, primarily bankers, financiers, and others, it is just without comparison. I think that the wealth gap right now in this country is far worse even than in pre-1929 America. It is just disgusting. But again, my point remains. If you're going to raise taxes on the wealthy, don't use that money to give to the Department of Education to cancel loans. Why don't we build some bridges and I don't know, do some reparations even? I would rather see that money go to the people who need it. Again, I'm kidding about the reparations. We take no stand on any other issue. I'm just saying, you would be far better served to take that money and give it to real people, like poor people or something, than to take that money and give it to the Department of Education. That's just nonsense. That's the swamp talking. That's the big government nonsense that we're all being fooled by. But nonetheless, Biden is at least mouthing the words loan cancellation. And believe me, folks, of the 55 million people in the country right now who have student loans or are co-signed on them, 44 million of them are freaking out. 44 million of them, 80%, are either unable to pay, and that's probably like 35 million, or they're paying and paying and paying, and that's probably like 7 or 8 million. They're paying and paying and paying, and their balance is going up. And these people vote. And so right now, President Trump has nothing. He's got air. In fact, in the entire Republican National Convention last week, I did not hear, and correct me if I'm wrong, I did not hear student loans mentioned even one time, not by the president, not by the dozens and dozens of speakers who spoke during the week. So the Republicans have nothing for us right now. Joe Biden, he pretends to have something. It's actually nothing. But I will say to a lesser extent, Joe Biden has indeed adopted Elizabeth Warren's bankruptcy plan. So on paper, on his website, he claims to be for the return of bankruptcy protections to student loans. And so that's not nothing. But coming from Biden, it's just bullshit, in my opinion. Biden's got a lot, well, my well-studied opinion. I think that when I say stuff about student loans, I think there's about a 99% chance that it's true. And so I can tell you that with what Biden has put forth right now, number one, almost nobody will actually get their loans canceled. Number two, the chances are that bankruptcy will not be returned to student loans. That's just the truth. But most people don't know the truth. No, most people aren't smart like I am. And by the way, if Joe Biden wants our endorsement, he will pledge that by executive order, he will return bankruptcy protections to student loans. And by executive order, he will cancel student loans. He can do it. The president has not only the power to cancel student loans, the president also has the power to return bankruptcy protections to student loans. The president could order the Secretary of Education and its contractors to stop opposing student loan borrowers in bankruptcy court. Elizabeth Warren made that pledge, by the way. Joe Biden can make that pledge, and he should. And if he wants our endorsement, that's what he will do. And his campaign manager and his campaign, and he himself, know very well that that's what he needs to do. Because otherwise, it's just more bullshit. But bullshit or not, folks, most people in the country don't know that. And so Joe Biden just even mouthing the words bankruptcy, mouthing the words loan cancellation, that is enough to strongly compel the 44 million voters in the country, and they do vote, that, well, okay, apparently Biden's got something for me, Trump has nothing. And these people are losing, most of these people are losing sleep over their student loans, folks. The student loan issue is a very strong motivator for them. So if the election were held tomorrow, I don't think it's any stretch to say that at least 10, if not maybe 15 million people who otherwise wouldn't have voted, or maybe who would have voted for Trump, they're on the fence. And 40% of everybody consider themselves to be independent, by the way. So it's no stretch to say that 10, maybe even 15 million people who either wouldn't have voted or would have voted for Trump will instead vote for Joe Biden. Now, with everything that else is going on with the election, I don't know, but all else being equal, a 15 million vote plus for Joe Biden, which probably would be 2 to 3 million or something minus from President Trump, that's enough to turn a loss into a landslide and vice versa. So all else being equal, folks, I don't see how President Trump can possibly win this election because of the student loan issue. So if you like President Trump, I strongly urge you to contact the White House and say, dudes, don't say dudes, be be a little more effective communicator than that. Make the point very forcefully to anyone you know at the White House. Go to whitehouse.gov/contact. Do whatever you can do to compel your candidate, your president, President Trump, that he has got to, at a minimum, return bankruptcy protections to student loans by executive order before the election if he wants to get some of those voters back. But returning bankruptcy protections, while certainly I would be thrilled with that, and that would be enough to get our endorsement. Most people don't want to file for bankruptcy, and giving people back the right to do something as terrible as filing for bankruptcy, I'm not sure that they would actually run out to the polls and vote for Trump because he did that. I don't know. Frankly, I think President Trump needs to rise up, step up, show some real spine. He said he was going to drain the swamp. Well, here's his chance. And actually cancel all federally owned student loans. That would be the way that President Trump could get those voters back on his side of the ledger. Now, would it be enough to win the election for him? I don't know. But I do know that I don't see a way that he can win this election if he does nothing on student loans right now. And you can take that to the bank, actually. I've just laid out the data to you. You can be your own judge if what I'm saying is true or not. But if you believe that there are 44 million voters in the country, 60% of whom, by the way, identify either as being Republican or independents, if you believe that there are 44 million people in the country losing sleep over their student loans, then you really should also believe that a lot of those people, what Biden has put forth, even though it's bullshit, are enough to swing a lot of voters his way. 10 million, 15 million, that is indeed enough to swing the election. Like big time swing. Like that probably is 3 million guys who would have voted for Trump that vote for Biden instead. Maybe more. I don't know. I'm usually pretty conservative in my estimates, so it could be well more than that. So if you like Trump, you had better get to the Trump people right now. Maybe even go to your local Republican Party headquarters or something and have them watch this video. I'm willing to stand behind everything I just told you and provide written evidence in every point that I've just made. And when they see that data, that should light a fire under them because, guys, I just don't see Donald Trump winning this election given this, all else being equal. So, okay, folks, hey, I've gone a little bit too longer, I've gone a little longer tonight than I usually like to go. Let's just say that. I usually go 20 minutes. We've gone 40 tonight. Hopefully I caught all your questions and comments. A lot of times I do not, just because Facebook is just weird. So when I look at this later, I'll see a bunch of comments I didn't see. If I missed your comments, I apologize. Nothing I can do about it. But the last thing I will say, folks, is this petition that we're working on. You can see the link to it here or here. We've got to get our numbers up right now. We've got like 7 weeks before people start voting. We've got nearly 600,000 people on the petition now. We've got to triple or quadruple that soon. Like in the next week, we've got to get this petition surging. So if ever you were going to do anything to fight for yourself, fight for getting these loans gone, you would make this petition a project for you. Make a personal commitment to yourself that you're going to do everything you can to get at least 100 people to sign. So paste the link to it everywhere you can. Maybe pay some money to boost it. We don't make that money, by the way. It all goes to change.org. It's between you and change.org. But pay some money to get it exposed more. That does help a lot, by the way. We get about a third of our petitions from people paying money to boost it. But if you can't pay, I get that. Your efforts, you can probably get 500 people to sign just by your efforts, pasting the link to it, talking about it, sending the link to it to reporters, news organizations who you think should be reporting on it. And by the way, we've been featured on Fox News now, and national radio, and local Minneapolis Progressive Radio. We were all over the TV in the state of Wisconsin last week, so we're getting good. We're getting good press coverage. We've also done interviews with some very big people, some very big networks, and I am guardedly optimistic that we're going to be seeing some very good national pieces coming out soon. But folks, we need more media. You can help with that too. There's a million things you can be doing. Sitting there doing nothing, expecting that me or somebody else in this group is going to pull your weight for you is not what you should be doing. Waiting, watching, worrying, and doing nothing is exactly what the bad guys want you to do. They want you to do nothing. Don't give them the pleasure. Please, if ever you were going to do anything to fight for yourself, for the rest of the country, and for the tens and millions of people that are going to follow in our footsteps, the next 7 weeks would be it, starting tonight. So I leave it up to you, your own talents, your own skills, your own ideas. There's a million things you can do to help out with the petition, but just pick any 5 of those and make them happen. So, okay, folks, I'm going to leave it there at that. Hang in there. I'll be back tomorrow night. Ed will be. I'll be back Monday night as well. Ed will be back on Tuesday night. Things are changing fast here, so check back frequently and often. We're going to be having live streams nearly 7 nights a week going forward. So, all right, folks. I'll leave it there at that. Have a great week. Let's make this upcoming week count. And good luck. God bless and Godspeed.